All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the whole Philek out there, pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakwadash, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh by Shemal Shai. All right, and what I want to get into with this lesson, is eat thy bread and wine with a merry heart, and it's a precept. It's a lesson that's inspired by a precept I was reading the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 9, verse 7. And when you read, it says, "Go thy way, eat thy bread with joy, and drink thy wine with a merry heart. For now the Most High accepted thy works." Okay? Now, when you go into this, when you read through the book of Ecclesiastes, it speaks often about a man, drinking and eating and enjoying the work of his hands. Okay? Now, we know, of course, this can talk about literal, food, and drink. Okay? Literal food and, your young, okay, wine, and enjoying, the work of your hands, which there's nothing wrong with that, okay? But we know in the spirit, all right, the bread and wine is speaking of Yahweh Shai, it's speaking of the new covenant, it's speaking of reconciliation. That's why when you read it, go thy way, eat thy bread with joy, and drink thy wine with a merry heart, for now the Most High accepted thy works. Now, let's deal with the bread and wine, okay? Let's deal with the bread and wine, because when you go to Isaiah 55, it says, "Ho, okay, everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that have no money, come ye, buy and eat. Yeah, come buy wine and milk without money and without price." Okay? Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Okay? So what is it speaking of? It said those that thirst. What are we thirsting for? Is it a literal thirst? No, it's a spiritual thirst. You see? We suffer from spiritual hydration, man. Spiritual, all right, malnutrition. And you get both from what? Bread and wine. What's the bread and wine of the spirit? That's why I said, wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread? Wait a minute. So it's mentioning what? Bread and wine. Okay? As Isaiah 55:1 in NLT said, "Come take your choice of wine or milk. It's all free. Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, and you labor for that which satisfies not," man? Okay? Because we wasn't satisfied with Christianity. Our spirit wasn't being quenched. And we was empty. Like you got this thing in America called empty calories, man. Food actually no nutritional value. You see, and that's what the doctrines of this world, they're likening to foods with no nutritional value. You see, the doctrines, they do nothing for the spirit. They don't satisfy the spirit. That's why even now, every time we read, every time we watch a video, it's a feeling experience. When you read the scriptures now with the Holy Spirit, it's a feeling experience. You listen to videos, edifies. It's a feeling experience, man, because that spiritual thirst is being quenched. That spiritual appetite is being satisfied, man. It says, "Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, and you labor for that which satisfies not? Hearken diligently unto me, eat ye that which is good, and let your soul," you see, let your soul delight itself in fatness, man. So our spirit is being delighted in the fatness of the bread and wine of the scriptures. Okay? Which is leading to what? A new covenant. Because when you read, it says, incline, verse 3, incline your ear. Okay? Incline your ear and come unto me. Hear, and your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant. Okay? Going to the new covenant. All right? Which is going to be in effect when we're changed. When Yahweh Shai returns and we're changed. Okay, but right now we have this grace period to where we can buffet on this understanding. Be satisfied with the bread and wine of the scriptures. And it says, and delight your soul, and delight your soul. All right, it says, and let your soul delight itself in fatness. It says, incline your ear and come unto me. Hear, and ye shall live, and your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David, man. Because this doctrine is leading to the ultimate mercy, which is us being delivered from the destruction, man, and being changed. Okay, but it begins with us partaking and eating this bread and wine, all right, and being merry in the spirit. This doctrine, prophecy, just gives us joy, man. We just like when you eat good food and drink wine, your dopamines are going off, you're being stimulated, you're feeling, in this good mood. Okay, well, prophecy is doing the same thing for us, man. This doctrine and understanding prophecy was doing the same thing. It's like eating a good meal. It's up on another level. That's why we hear about prophecy, man. It's satisfying. We see things happening. We hear about things happening. Okay, and we see how it aligns with prophecy, man. These things are satisfying to us like a good meal, and some good drink. You see, let's go from there, because the bread of life. You go to St. John chapter 6. All right, this is St. John 6 and 48 and 49. It's St. John chapter 6, verse 48 and 49 says, I am the bread of life. Okay? It's Yahushua speaking. So when we speak about the bread, we're speaking of Yahushua, which is the volume of the book. Okay? So as we digest this bread, Yahushua, the volume of the book. Okay? What is it leading to? Your father did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. Okay? This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. This doctrine is leading to actual immortality, where we won't die, man. You see, you can eat, to sustain your body. You can drink good wine, and it's good for that moment. But the body is still what? Dying. But as we consume Yahushua, as we follow Yahushua, as we digest this word, begin to live by this word, it's going to go to us being changed. You can eat the best food and drink the best wine every day of your life, and it's not going to change you. It's not going to make you immortal. Okay? But following this doctrine, you see, digesting Yahushua, living this thing, believing this thing, ultimately it's going to lead to us being changed to immortals, man. Well, we won't die. That's going to be literal, man. You see, that's why I say, well, eat, all right, your bread and drink your wine, and we'll be merry, and we're able to do this in Yahushua, you see, and it's leading what to that new covenant, the sure mercies of David. So that's why when you go here, Matthew 26, and let's go here, Matthew 26 and 26, and it says, and as they were eating, all right, Yahushua took bread and blessed it, and brake it, and gave it to the disciples, and said, take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, drink ye of it all, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. So the bread, was a representation of Yahushua's body. Okay? Which Yahushua was getting ready to be sacrificed. Which he sacrificed was a sacrifice for a new covenant, which will be established at his return. Okay? So he was actually eating bread and drinking wine with the disciples. But what was that going into, man? Okay? That's him breaking bread in the scriptures, because understanding that sacrifice is a part of the doctrine, man. What that means. All right? How that reconciled, okay, a remnant of the Lord's people, you see, to their power. Okay? So when you go into the bread and wine, okay, we understand in the spirit is speaking of Yahushua, that sacrifice, which will lead to a new covenant. That's why I said when you go back to Ecclesiastes 9, Ecclesiastes 9 and 7, and it says, go thy way, eat thy bread with joy, and drink thy wine with a merry heart. For the Most High now accepted thy works, because until Yahushua, okay, did what he did, the Lord wasn't accepting our works, man. We was cut off. Okay? We was cut off, man. But through Yahushua, now the Lord is beginning to accept our works. That sacrifice, man, that blood. His body, was given for a sacrifice or reconciliation, man. You see? And his reconciling is going to be completed when we're changed. Okay? But our power is allowing us to what? Be acceptable now. These lessons are acceptable. Our sacrifices in the spirit are acceptable now. That's why you go to let's go here to this 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. It says, ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable acceptable to the Most High by Yahushua HaMashiach. Okay, read this again. You also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house, okay, a holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifice acceptable to the Most High by Yahushua HaMashiach. So now what we're doing is being received in the heavens, man. This is like that sweet Savior, this word going out, man, the true doctrine going forth. The elect and their commitment to the truth, man, dedicate. Say we're a living sacrifice. And it's acceptable to the Most High by Yahushua, based on what Yahushua did, man, that blood that was shed. So now, okay, as we tap into the scriptures, man, as we, get into this word, we can eat, thy bread and drink thy wine with a merry heart, because now are our works acceptable, man. And it's leading to us being changed, man. Okay, within the new covenant that's to come with Yahushua. So, yeah, just want to tap into that. Something I was reading, but Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you future edified. Till next time, I say Shalom, Kwam Yashala, Abba, Soon, Shalom.